So shaping is super important when it comes to brows, and I think it's one of the things that makes most of the difference between good work and great work. In this chapter, I'm going to teach you why you should learn how to shape upside down, make sure that it's flattering into your client's liking, how to be as symmetrical as possible, and how to get it right each time, and the tools I use. So for the tools I use, or the tools you will need, I use a China marker crayon. I use either Nixon or Sharpie brand. I use a shaping sticker, and these are stickers that you can find online. They are the clear stickers that help you measure. You'll see me use them and you'll see exactly what I mean. Also a concealer. I prefer to use a pot concealer, but then again, you can use liquid concealer if you prefer that. I just find it to be a little too messy. A barber blade or a brow eraser. This I use to help me groom the brow, but this also helps move the Nixon or the Sharpie crayon. It helps you push it to get those lines really sharp and straight. I prefer a barber blade, but if you're a beginner or not familiar or uncomfortable with barber blades, then definitely a brow eraser. I'll also use a caliper, and calipers are great to help you measure the brows and help you transfer measurements, what you'll see me do. And a mapping string. Now this is optional. You can find them online. There are the mapping strings that come coated in charcoal powder and help you create those black lines along the face, and this is really helpful for that symmetry work. The type of shaping that I do for micro shading and for ombre brows, it's more inspired by makeup look, so it gives you a bit more freedom and flexibility. It imitates that crisp, clean brow makeup. When we're doing shading with either micro shading or ombre brows, I want to make sure that that shaping is as clean as possible. This also helps you make it a bit more flattering into your client's liking. There are other shaping methods that are a bit more limiting, and that's why I steer clear of them, and I'd rather use a more freehand, if you would, shaping method. I'll also teach you how to be as symmetrical as possible, and that's one of the benefits of this. You're not really taking the current eyebrow hair as much into consideration as you would with other methods. You're trying to be symmetrical and very clean and crisp. And this shaping is also great for cover-ups because you can take up the whole prior eyebrow work and place it inside of your current shaping. Now, why should you learn upside down, and why do I teach my students to start learning upside down? And that is basically because that's most likely how you'll end up working. Unless you're able to position yourself, or you have a certain chair where your clients maybe sit up straight, or you have that comfortable approach, learning upside down is going to be super handy in the future because you can have your clients laying down in either a massage bed or reclinable barber chair, depending on what you're using, but you're still able to be as close as possible to the eyebrows without having anything get in your way. Most room setups are going to have a small massage bed, and most room setups are not huge, so definitely learning upside down, I find it can be really beneficial because you'll be able to work more comfortably in the future. Now the entire video I am going to be doing it right side up because I want you to see it a bit more clearly, but I definitely encourage you practice upside down. The steps for shaping are going to be as you see on the screen right now. So I start by marking a midline. I'll place my measuring adhesive or sticker. I'll draw one eyebrow on and clean the edges with concealer, and I'll reach a consensus with my client with the first eyebrow. The reason for this, I found it very taxing and time consuming to do both eyebrows symmetrical, measure them, get them right, and then have your clients start tweaking them. You might end up frustrated and maybe not with the best results, so I'd rather get one eyebrow shape to the T exactly what they want and then mimic that on the other side. I'll mimic the second eyebrow, then I'll verify for symmetry. And I mean, worst case scenario, and this is for people that really struggle with shaping, maybe use a shaping stencil. If you find that shaping this way is not your exact forte, that is completely fine. Artistry is not defined by how talented you might be by shaping freehand or by executing this method. I find your artistry comes from what you work the most comfortable with. So at the beginning, if you find you do want to use a shaping stencil, even just as a reference, then do so. I don't think that's justification for any type of critique. With this technique of shaping, basically we're aiming to find 4 very straight lines, 2 lines that are going to be parallel for the body of the brow, and 2 angled lines that are going to make the tail of the brow. Where those 2 lines join, then we'll curve those lines and then eventually give you the final result of that brow. The reason for this is I do not like doing curved body eyebrows, meaning where eyebrows have a curve all the way through the body, because when you're working with shading, you're trying to stretch the skin and work in straight lines. So you want to make sure that those lines are as straight as possible so you can then shade it comfortably in. I'll start by marking the midline with a mapping string, or you can do this with a shaping crayon too. When marking a midline, I like to base off of the Cupid's bow and not necessarily the nose of the client. A lot of methods will refer to the nose, but I find sometimes you can get people with deviated noses, or sometimes if they had an accident, the nose might not be completely straight. I find basing off the Cupid's bow to find the midline a lot better. Once I've marked the midline, then I'm going to place my shaping sticker, and I try to place that as centered as possible and as leveled as possible. You can see here on the bottom of that shaping sticker, it looks a little bit deviated from the midline. That's fine, because the midline is not necessarily perfect going down the nose. I like to base off of the midline on the forehead, as I find that surface can guide off a bit better. I definitely recommend standing up for this step, as sometimes sitting down might be a bit too up close. Now we're going to start drafting the first eyebrow. Make sure to keep those body lines straight. Use mapping string if you need to draw these lines. That's completely fine. And your first draft does not need to be perfect. I never demand perfection from students or even from myself. I find it's a lot better to tweak something than it is to try and be perfect right off the get-go. So just draft an eyebrow and then start cleaning up around it. Here, I just wanted to show you the references that I mentioned earlier, how those body lines should be really straight, and how the lines coming from the tail of the brow are also very straight. They just curve where they meet there at the top and bottom of the arch. So I'll start drafting my first eyebrow, and as you can see here, I'll try to draw either top or bottom line, nor specific order, and as straight a line as I can. If you can see, the sticker has measurements on there too, which are a great suggestion for where your eyebrow should sit, especially with people with very sparse hair. Luckily, this model had a defined arch already, or a defined spot where her arch began, but you can definitely use the reference on your shaping sticker. They'll usually have either an A, B, or C indicating the areas of the brow, or they'll have like a 1, 2, 3, whichever. Here, A would signify the beginning of the brow, B would be the arch, and C would be that ending tail point. I find this saves you a lot of time when you're trying to draw lines all across the face. That shaping sticker does become very helpful. So I've drawn the top line very straight. Now I'm going for the bottom line, again as parallel as possible to that top line. And whenever I come off of that straight line, then I can just clean it up after. Again, this is just your first rough draft, and then we're going to clean it up as we go. Now I'm just drawing on my tail there. I'm just doing a straight line going downwards. And as I said, this is not necessarily going to reflect the final result. This is just to help me draft something. Once I've drafted it, then I can tweak it until it's to my liking and to my client's liking. Now you can see that eyebrow is a pretty rough draft and it doesn't look perfect yet. That's fine, and that's exactly what you want to see. It doesn't need to be perfect right off the get-go. You just want to make sure that your eyebrow is starting to take in some shape. My second step here is going to be concealer. So the concealer is great because it helps you create a contrast with the shape of the brow, and it helps you keep the lines cleaner. And this is going to come super helpful when you have to come in later and do either shading or your outline around the brow. You really want to create that contrast so you can see exactly where your line should be and exactly where your placement should be. This also helps you define the edges of your brow. I find when I work just with shaping crayon, I can't really see the defined edges of my brow, and that gives me a little bit of anxiety. I like to see everything super sharp. So keep it clean, use very little product at the time, and make it beautiful. I added that because sometimes I like to use a makeup sponge, those disposable sponges, so you can blend in that concealer. So when your client opens their eyes and they look at what you've done and they're gonna judge the shaping that you've done, it looks clean and concise, kind of like makeup already. You don't want it to look messy. You don't want smudges of concealer all over the place. So I am gonna use a concealer brush, and that is just a flat makeup brush. Here, I've taken the liberty of cleaning up the edges a little bit before I brought in the concealer. So now I'm just going to go in with that concealer very sharply and using that flat edge of the concealer to push up against the shaping crayon that I already did. And making sure that those lines are nice and straight. Get really up close from an angle and try to see if those lines are straight. If the lines are looking a little bit jagged, or if the lines are looking a little bit bent or curved, make sure you sharpen that up. Obviously at my arch and at my tail, lines are going to curve in a little bit more, but you want to make sure those lines are as sharp as possible. So the second step after I've created that contrast is I go in and try to fuse that concealer downwards a little bit more towards the eye, and then I'm going to use that makeup sponge to blend it in a little bit and give it more of that makeup look. So when my client does look at the shaping, it doesn't look like a freak show of concealer and shaping crayon. Make sure to keep things really nice and clean, and again, don't use a lot of product at the time. So now we're going to groom. With the barber blade or brow eraser, we're going to push down the crayon to make those lines sharper at the top. Tweezer if you need or if you prefer, but I definitely like to do this while I'm shaping. You can definitely groom before if you want, but there's a reason I do it last, and that's because I don't want to be shaving off a bunch of hair if I'm still drafting a shape. I don't want my client to leave with half an eyebrow growing out. I'd rather leave it up until the end so I can reference their eyebrow hair as much as possible. You still want to take up as much as possible of their natural eyebrow hair area, because that'll make the eyebrows a little less high maintenance. If you use up all the area where their eyebrow hair naturally grows, you'll make the eyebrows really low maintenance and they'll look good year round. Whereas if you're steering away from their natural eyebrow shape a lot, I mean you can, but if you're steering away a lot from the natural eyebrow shape, the eyebrow hair growth, then it's going to be a very high maintenance semi-permanent makeup and sometimes annoying for clients. Now here I'm using an eyebrow eraser to show you that you can use both, and then I eventually go back to the barber blade just because I prefer it and I'm more comfortable with it. But that would be your finished result of your first brow.